Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have 11 stories ranging from tales of video games, cemeteries, and so much more. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 1,000 likes. Subscribing if you're new is also very much appreciated, as I post content just like this every 5 days. The channel has been growing extremely well lately, so I just wanted to say a quick thank you to everybody who drops a like, drops a comment, things that help out the algorithm, or even just tells people about the channel. Thank you so much. I'm having a lot of fun creating content for all of you, and I look forward to see how far we can take this. Enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. I'm writing this because I'm backed into a corner. There's a camera trained on me, and I have nowhere to go. If anyone ever reads this, know that there's something evil going on in Port Leyland. I don't know what, and I'm scared that I won't live long enough to find out. I'm sitting here, helpless, a missing poster trembling in my hand as I write this with the other. The only thing I can do is leave this behind in the hope that someone can finish what I never meant to start. I'll go through what happened in as much detail as I remember so someone can make sense of this. I live in a small town called Port Leyland in northern Canada. It's undergone deindustrialization in recent years and has fallen into a state of disrepair. Long story short, there's an old FBI headquarters that was left abandoned 17 years ago. Without a sliver of an explanation, the police department was just uprooted and moved to somewhere closer to the city. No one knows why, but of course, conspiracy theories are running rampant throughout the community. Some think the government is trying to cover something up. Nothing new has been built on the site, and where better to hide top secret information than in an abandoned FBI building in a totally inconspicuous little town. I've been meaning to explore it since my early teens, but all of my friends discouraged me from going, so I've decided to explore it alone. I packed a bag this morning with some snacks and a water bottle, along with a head torch. I bought a mask from the local pharmacy. That old place is probably a gold mine of asbestos, fiberglass, and whatever the hell else. I had to wait until nightfall. Even though it's been abandoned for so long, it's still pretty heavily patrolled by undercover cop cars. When I arrive at the gate, it's 11:49 p.m. It's pitch black and the whole neighborhood is pretty much asleep. The cop cars that patrol this place take shifts, and I've observed I have around half an hour before the next one comes. There's a weakness in the wire gate close to the bottom, so I pull up and push my backpack through. I crawl through the gap, the wire scratching at my clothes, but I manage to fit through. Being a petite woman has its perks. There's about a kilometer of dense forest surrounding the place, which I have to navigate. I wait until I'm a while in to turn on my head torch, just in case there are still cops around. The base should be just a straight line from here, so I trudge on. The night I chose is particularly dark, so I don't have to worry about anyone seeing me going into the forest. It gets super dark here super early in winter, which is perfect for my purposes. I can't help but notice how quiet it is in the woods. I haven't heard an owl or the footsteps of a badger slinking away from me as I walk. No cicadas, no crickets, nothing. The rest of the town is alive with the wildlife at night, but this place has a kind of deafening silence about it. After walking on through the stretch of woodland for about 5 minutes, I'm stopped in my tracks. As I place my foot down ahead of me, I hear a sickening squelch followed by an unpleasant crunch. I recoil in horror, immediately pulling my foot away and stumbling back. It's a dead animal. Willing myself to look closer, I discover it's the rotting corpse of a fox. The smell is putrid, unlike anything I've ever smelt before. It smells like death with a suffocating chemical smell hanging thick in the air. That's when I realize it has no head. What kind of animal could do that? There are no remnants of its decaying head, no bones, nothing. It's like something just ripped its head clean off. Deeply unsettled, I walk around it, covering my mouth and nose. I wipe my boot against some leaves, telling myself not to throw up. I'm perturbed by the fact the first animal I've come across is dead and decapitated, with a weird, artificial smell coming from it. I decide that it's nothing, and I'm probably just being paranoid. I'm not going to let anything discourage me from exploring this place. I watch my footing carefully for the remainder of the walk, trying to push the noises and the smell of that thing out of my mind. I eventually reach a clearing, after what seems like hours of walking. The building is just a few yards ahead of me. It's surreal. I've only ever seen this place from afar, shrouded by trees. I've never even seen any pictures of it. It towers far above the trees with concrete walls painted white, dirtied by years of disuse. The main door is chained up really tight, but I've heard rumors there's an entrance through the basement. I scout through the perimeter of the building. All of the windows are barred up with thick, iron-coated in a layer of flaking black paint. Some of the bars have been bent outwards. The glass in the windows smashed. I take a closer look at one of the windows. That's weird. Think to myself. Most of the glass had fallen outwards onto the ground. The window was smashed from the inside. Why would someone want to break out instead of breaking in? Confused but still determined to find a way in, I carry on circling the building. I come across a pile of leaves and twigs and warily use my foot to brush them away. This reveals a hatch that I can only assume leads into the basement. I brush away the remaining leaves with my hands. It's worn and made of wood with a small chain holding the handles together. It's thin and very corroded, so I began searching for a large rock to break it. I find one, before putting on my mask and taking a deep breath in. I pin one side of the chain down with one of my hands while I raise the rock above my head with the other, trying to target a weakness in the chain. I bring the rock down as hard as I can. The chain breaks with a clatter. The impact from the rock has made a small hole in the hollow wood of the hatch. I wonder how much of this place is still intact. I carefully open the doors, my eyes doing one last sweep of the perimeter before I go. Holding on tight to the edges of the hatch, I start to descend the rickety wooden staircase. Suddenly, the stairway gives in with a creak, sending me tumbling down to the ground. Plumes of dust flying into the air, filling my eyes, nose, and mouth. There's a pain shooting through my calf. I rub my eyes, desperately trying to see through the fog. I bring my knee up to my chest. There's a huge splinter sticking out of my calf. A pool of blood is quickly saturating my trousers. I look up at the opening. It was about 10 steps down, and it would be near impossible for me to climb up there, even without the splinter. I grip my teeth, debating whether or not to pull it out. Having an open wound in a place like this is hardly a smart choice, but the intense burning continues throughout my leg. There's no way I can get home and bandage it up without going into the building. I decide to carry on. After all, I'm not going to let anything stop me from exploring this place. I pull myself up on one of the stairs that still remained intact. I stand there, hunched over for a moment, taking a deep breath in before continuing. I adjust my head torch and begin to navigate my surroundings. The basement just rows upon rows of shelves. Like the storeroom of a museum or an evidence locker, there are stacks of disintegrating cardboard boxes full of faded paperwork. Everything is coated in a blanket of dust. The pain in my leg begins to subside as I make my way through the labyrinth of shelves. There's something thrilling about imagining something lurking in the shadows, playing a kind of cat and mouse game with an unknown entity. Adrenaline is what I live on. Most of the labels on the boxes are yellow and faded, the cardboard being eaten away by little critters. The paperwork stacked in them is unintelligible police jargon. The beam of my head torch is illuminating the dust hanging thick ahead of me. I weave my way through the shelves up to a staircase leading up to the first floor. I warily walk up the stairs before emerging into a large space packed with desks and worn dividers. Everything has been left, dozens upon dozens of computers and desk chairs, falling into ruin, left to rot. Why wouldn't they take stuff like that with them? I walk up to one of the computers to take a closer look, reaching into my breast pocket for my phone to send pictures to my friends. When I look up, I see a little flicker of light. The webcam of the computer is on. I stumble backwards out of sight of the camera to gather my thoughts. Why is electricity still running? It must be motion activated. I can't think of another explanation. But why? Something about this isn't right. I scan around for an exit, ducking behind the dividers in case there are more webcams switched on. I find my way into a small storage cupboard, hoping to find a floor plan. There's nothing. Apart from a cleaning rota that hasn't been updated since 2003. There's a filing cabinet in the corner with a mop and bucket leaning against it, with a few metal racks of cleaning supplies. All of the handles are blanketed in dust, apart from one. I pull the handle, revealing a column of yellow files. In amongst the old files, there's something poking out. It's bright red, and I'm immediately drawn to it. I pull it out. It's an envelope. There's no name or address on the outside. I carefully open it up to reveal a sheet of paper inside. I grab the top and begin pulling on it. The word "missing" is emblazoned in black ink at the top. I continue pulling it. That's weird. It's dated today. I pull it up even farther to reveal a picture. I feel my heart leap into my throat, my mind becoming hazy with thoughts, flying past too quickly for me to catch. I take a step back in pure horror. I'm snapped out of my daze by a small, mechanical clicking noise. My eyes are drawn up to the corner of the ceiling. A security camera is rotating, focusing in with a blinking red light. I back against the wall and stare at the missing poster in disbelief, my blood running cold. The picture. It's me. I'm sure there isn't a single person reading this that doesn't know what liminal spaces are by now, but just in case. The concept of liminal spaces relates to physical locations that are typically transitional in nature. Hallways, waiting rooms, and parking lots are classic examples. The liminal aesthetic can be defined by the unique feeling of eerie nostalgia people experience when presented with such places outside of their designated context. For instance, an abandoned hospital corridor might seem ominous and uncanny due to the prevalence of human activity usually associated with medical facilities. While the specific aesthetics has always existed, it was recently popularized and further defined by the Backrooms, a, by now, infamous creepypasta about what happens when you no-clip out of reality. At least, that's how I first became familiar with the term. Like many other fans of the original work, I was eager to contribute to the ever-expanding subgenre of horror games inspired by liminal spaces. The project itself wasn't anything revolutionary. Basically, it began as a glorified first-person walking simulator without any particular purpose or goal, where you can explore various unique 3D liminal environments. The only thing about it that was somewhat novel was that I didn't intend in implementing any actual scares into the game, instead relying entirely on the atmosphere to instill a sense of constant suspense in the player. Pretentious, I know, but I've always liked the idea of a horror game that leaves you in a perpetual state of questioning whether you're truly alone or not. There are very few games that scratch that particular itch for me, so I decided to just make it myself. The first level I created was an abandoned multi-story car park. I based it on the one across the street. Each floor was near identical to the last, and with the outside being just an endless expanse of fog, you couldn't really tell whether you were making progress or you were just stuck in a loop. Again, I know that what I'm describing doesn't sound all that impressive, but keep in mind that I was a 16-year-old kid learning how to use a gaming engine for the first time. I must have replayed that level over 50 times, making sure that everything, from the camera's movements to the ambience, was exactly the way I wanted it. I remember spending days just toying with the shaders alone. I didn't want the location to feel too artificial, but I also didn't want to distract from the liminality by adding extra clutter. I was looking for that sweet spot between minimalist and dingy. Once I was finally done, or at least as close to done as I was going to get, I asked my best friend Alex if he could play it for me and tell me what he thought. He is a bit of a wimp when it comes to any kind of horror media, thus making him the perfect test subject. I made a point of deliberately not telling him that there were no ghosts or spooky monsters haunting the level. I was looking for a genuine impression, after all, and well, I thought it would have been funny. He called me a few hours later. I could tell from his nervous laughter that he was still playing. "Alright, bruv, I give up. What's behind the door? How do you open it?" I was confused. I didn't remember implementing any doors or anything that could be described as one. My initial assumption was that he had caught on to the joke and was now trying to mess with me in return, so I just played along. "Oh, that. Yeah, so you gotta collect the 77 pages, and then a hyper-realistic animatronic Slenderman will come out of there and start chasing you." I could practically hear him rolling his eyes. "Hilarious, mate. No, but seriously, how do I open it? I've looked everywhere for like a pressure pad or a key or something. At least give me a hint." I persisted, sharply dismissing his nagging. But after a while it became apparent that his frustration was genuine. We moved the call to Discord and he shared his screen, showing me what he was talking about. Turns out that he was being very much for real. Plastered across one of the walls was the flat texture of a door. It was red, resembling a fire exit, which made it all the more jarring against the color palette of grays and faded browns that otherwise dominated the environment. I blinked in confusion and leaned forward in my chair. I certainly hadn't put that there. With Alex still on the call, I booted up my level editor and clipped up to the 7th floor, the same floor that he was on. Sure enough, the bright red door was on my version of the project as well. It appeared to be part of the texture pack that I was using. Not sure how, but I guessed I'd somehow missed it during my numerous playthroughs. It was a fun little WTF moment, but obviously nothing we were about to lose sleep over. I even briefly considered keeping it there as an inside joke, but ended up replacing the door with a more fitting surface. I began work on the 2nd level just a few days later. It was inspired by a reoccurring dream I've had. A looping, white, sterile corridor with rows of yellow lockers on each side. The player would have been dropped at the end of it and given no further directive. There were no puzzles to be solved, no hidden switch that would reveal some secret passageway. That was sort of the point. I remember thinking I was being so clever, so abstract, as though I was on the verge of creating the piece de resistance of all walking sims that would be dissected and theorized on for years to come. In reality, all I did was make a tech demo using a bunch of pre-made assets. A Stanley Parable, it most definitely was not. After playtesting it for a bit, I sent the finished version to Alex. It didn't even take a full hour for him to call me back. This time around, he sounded more agitated than nervous. "I've been walking for like 30 minutes. Where am I meant to be going?" I laughed, but internally, I was actually quite annoyed with him for not appreciating my vision for what it was. I chalked it up to my friend being a meathead without a single creative bone in his body. There was surely no other reason as to why somebody wouldn't be positively enthralled by the mere prospect of walking through the same hallway over and over again. Don't know. Try tugging the left wall. I snidely replied, "Screw off. It all looks the same. Am I supposed to, do something with the lockers? There's the door, but that doesn't seem to do anything. So I'm assuming..." I perked up. Door? What door? Alex laughed sarcastically. Don't start again. It wasn't even that funny the first time. I scooted closer to my desk and adjusted my headset, adopting what I considered to be a more serious tone while launching the editor once more. Where is it? Alex's microphone crackled as he exhaled into it. He was still convinced that I was trying to mess with him, which, given our usual dynamic, I guess I couldn't blame him for. I don't know, man. Close to where you spawn? I found it almost immediately. Snugly nestled between two neighboring lockers was the red door. Unlike its previous iteration, it was no longer just a flat texture, but rather a fully rendered 3D asset. I couldn't believe it, yet there it was, its clean metallic surface gleaming beneath the harsh lighting. Just to reiterate once more, I'm absolutely, positively certain that I hadn't put that there. I could no longer attribute it to negligence either. It's one thing to accidentally misplace a texture, but there was no way that I had somehow added an entirely new object to the game without realizing it. Of course, there was nothing actually behind the door, nor a way to open it as far as I could tell, but that didn't make the whole situation any less weird. The only other person that would have had access to my computer was Mom, but she doesn't even know how to work a browser, much less do something like this. Could a hacker be responsible? But why would somebody take the time to remotely edit my game and leave everything else on my PC untouched? Just to freak me out? They were succeeding if that was the case. Once I managed to persuade Alex that this wasn't my idea of an elaborate prank, he was even more freaked out than I was. He went full creepypasta protagonist on me, saying that the game must have been haunted or something. Now, I like my Ben Drowned and Sonic.exe as much as the next kid that grew up in the 2010s, but it would have taken a lot more than that for me to consider the possibility of a spooky cyber ghost that gets off on putting random doors in people's games. We spent the rest of the evening talking in circles. In the end, we nestled on the tried and true method of doing nothing. I vaguely remember mentioning something about having my OS reinstalled, but I never got around to it. I already had a lot of things that I was dealing with at the time. I suppose you could say that this project was my means of escapism. It made me feel productive, like I was actually working towards something, however inconsequential. In short, I needed it, and I wasn't about to let a few bizarre coincidences take it away from me. The third and last level that I ever worked on was my most ambitious yet. The way I envisioned it is kind of difficult to describe. I think it was inspired by an image I saw on Reddit. Imagine a large field, complete with rolling hills and broad valleys. But instead of grass, it's all covered by a green carpet. Pinned against the painted-on sky was a very obvious spotlight, which would have followed the player around, always shining directly at them whenever they would look up. The goal was to make it feel like you were stranded in this uncanny, poorly put together mock reality that didn't even try to hide the fact that it was a set. It, as in whatever was messing with my game, didn't even wait for me to fully finish the level this time. I was still in the process of making sure that the camera didn't clip through the more uneven parts of the terrain. As I turned my point of view around, I saw it. The by now all too familiar red door, suspended in the middle of an untextured plane. It stood vertically on its own. There was nothing behind or around it. I would have probably been more unnerved had a part of me not subconsciously expected for it to eventually show up. In fact, I wasn't scared at all for some reason. Worse, I felt inexplicably drawn to it. My player character inched forth without my input. It was like I was in a cutscene. Soon enough, I was standing directly in front of that door, looking up at its imposingly tall frame. I had neither the option to step back nor approach any further. As I looked down at the fully rendered handle, a prompt appeared in semi-transparent white letters. Press E to open. I swallowed hard and, desperate to sate this newfound sense of morbid curiosity, did as instructed. My screen went completely black and then transitioned to solid red. Another prompt floated into view. Use WASD keys to move. I would have never realized that I could control my character again had the game not expressly told me. Upon retreating a few steps, I realized that I had been standing up close to a wall, and in actuality, I was in some kind of enclosed space. Every inch of it was painted in that same shade of solid, uniform red. Unless viewed from a specific angle, you couldn't really tell where one surface ended and another began. It was nausea-inducing. I tried pulling up the console menu. Nothing happened. I could neither exit nor minimize the game. Regardless of what combination of keys I attempted, it became increasingly clear that I was no longer in control. And yet, I couldn't quite bring myself to press the power button on my PC. I had this inexplicable urge to uncover the secrets of this place. It was like some sort of primal impulse that was hardwired into my brain. The seemingly endless network of empty spaces was divided by walls and narrow passageways. Distinguishing one room from another was close to impossible. It felt like I was walking in circles, and that most likely was the case for a good while, until I stumbled into a room that actually had something in it. Placed on an equally red table was a can of silver spray paint. Immediately upon picking it up, I was prompted to press F on my keyboard to use it. A crudely drawn check mark materialized on the surface I was facing. I now had the ability to mark off places that I've already explored, which, needless to say, proved immensely valuable. Armed with my new way of navigation, I now felt like I was making some actual progress. The more I explored, the more I began to pick up certain patterns. I realized that each section was comprised of a set of cyclical layouts. For example, every 5th room was L-shaped, and every 10th room was H-shaped and connected to multiple corridors, one of which always looped back to the start of the sequence. It practically turned into a rhythm game. 1, 2, go left, 3, 4, go right. If the levels that I'd already created could be looked at as their own self-contained microcosms, then I suppose that this was their version of the back rooms. A maze of uniformly textured, procedural spaces that, ironically, embodied the spirit of liminality even better than anything I could have consciously conceived. And then, finally, after what felt like hours, I entered a room that was quite unlike the previous ones. The oppressive red was replaced by beige wallpaper. It gave me this intense feeling of déjà vu, and still does whenever I think about it. Mounted onto the opposite wall was what looked like a flat-screen TV. There were no other exits apart from the one that I came in through. I seemed to have reached the end of the monochromatic labyrinth. Upon approaching the vertically placed monitor, I was promptly presented with two options. Press Y to meet your host. Press N to go back. I paused for a moment and looked over at my phone. It was 4:45 a.m. I had already gone this far. No way I was backing down now. I briefly considered calling Alex, but thought better of it. Even if I did manage to wake him up, I would have then had to spend another hour trying to convince him that this wasn't my idea of a joke. No, I needed answers, and I needed them now. My finger hovered over the Y key. I took a deep, anxious breath and pressed it all the way down. The virtual TV came to life, white lines raced across its screen. At the center of a blank background appeared the still portrait of a man. The image was low res, that I could count the individual pixels that comprised it. What it lacked in detail, however, it made up for in expressiveness. The unfamiliar man's cartoonishly large frown dripped to the corners of his jaw, and his eyebrows were scrunched together in a peevish stare. It was like someone had taken the stock photo of a typical suburban dad and used a liquefy filter to exaggerate his features. I nearly jumped out of my seat as a grainy and eerily upbeat voice suddenly emanated from my speakers. There had been virtually no audio cues this far, which made it all the more jarring. Hello, guest 185. This is Henry. Henry is an introvert. Henry doesn't like having guests. What you see at the bottom of your screen is Henry's patience meter. There was now a green bar occupying the bottom of my POV. It was at 99%. You best get going. Henry's not a patient man. Use shift to sprint. After delivering its brief tutorial, the TV flickered and slumped down from its perch, crashing against the floor. I glanced down at the rapidly dwindling bar. 90%. The pressure was on. I was no longer questioning the logistics of what I was experiencing. I just knew that I had to find my way back, and quick. The logical part of my brain tried to reason with the rest of my body, assuring me that I was in no real danger, and yet there was no denying the pounding in my chest, or the cold beads of sweat rolling down my forehead. Using the shift key, as per instructed, I backtracked through the red corridors as swiftly as I could, applying the same methods that I used before, but in reverse. I audibly sighed in relief whenever I came across a previously marked room, as it assured me that I was headed in the right direction. 75%. It took me several hours to initially solve it, and I now had to reach the start of the maze in a fraction of that time. The increase in movement speed certainly helped, but not as much as I would have hoped. 30%. I could have sworn that the meter was decreasing faster the further I got. It was as if the place didn't really want me to leave and was just toying with me, making me think that I stood a chance at escaping. 5%. I was panting even though I wasn't the one actually running. I was so close, but evidently not close enough. As I turned a corner and headed down what I presumed to be the penultimate stretch, I saw that there was another asset blocking the claustrophobic passage. It was one of those old, bulky TV sets which projected a static image of the same warped face as before. It was pointed right at me, expecting me. 0%. Uh-oh. The disembodied, enthusiastic voice announced, "You've really gone and done it now. The one thing that Henry hates more than guests are guests who outstay their welcome. But not to worry." Suddenly, a loud thump shook the window next to my desk. My blood ran cold. I swallowed the proverbial lump in my throat and slowly turned my head towards it. There was a dark hand pressed against the glass. It was followed by another, and then another, all reaching in from different angles, until all I could see were various sized palms grasping at the flat pane, applying more and more pressure against it. "Henry will just have to pay you a visit instead. Henry could always use more red paint." I fell out of my chair just in time as the window practically exploded. Glittering shards scattered across my bedroom. Terrified, I rolled onto my hands and knees, propelling myself up to my feet before bolting for the door. A tsunami of hopelessness crashed against me as soon as I emerged onto the other side. I was no longer in my apartment. Stretching before me was a branching, crimson corridor. This wasn't a game anymore. Or if it was, I was the entertainment. Something grabbed the back of my sweatshirt. I squirmed away, leaving it in my pursuer's grasp. I ran, I screamed, and I pleaded. I barreled through the identical rooms and interrelated passages, desperate to evade the imminent presence that followed my every step. I glanced back for only a second, which was enough to refuel my panicked frenzy, as what I saw will haunt me until the day I die. A cluster of elongated limbs ending with human-shaped hands. Using them, it crawled forth like a centipede. At the center of the flailing mass was that face. Although its deep frown was now an impossibly wide grin filled with straight teeth, its eyes had become two circular voids. They trembled with excitement the closer it drew. This was it, I thought. There was no way that I was getting out of this alive. My legs were bound to give out sooner rather than later, and I was in no state to assess where I was going. Whatever that grotesque monstrosity was intending on doing to me, I just hoped that it was quick. I was on the verge of surrendering my fate when my salvation appeared before me in the most unlikely, and yet ironically fitting form. A red door. It blended so seamlessly with the walls that I saw only its outline, but it was there nonetheless. My way out. I mustered what remaining endurance I had and charged towards it. My lungs were on fire. I couldn't feel my calves anymore. It was like I was running on stilts. I shut my eyes and threw myself against the door, spilling onto the wet asphalt beyond it. My shoulder and elbow absorbed the brunt of the impact. Thankfully, it wasn't my skull. Still high on adrenaline, I snapped my head back. The door was gone. There was only concrete stained with old graffiti. I rubbed my bleeding elbow and steadily rose back up, then looked around. I was in the abandoned car park across from my apartment complex, the one that I used as inspiration for the first level I ever created. The morning sun shone through the gap in the outer wall. I broke down crying then and there. It was over. Against all odds, I had somehow survived and made it home. It was too good to be true, and, well, as it turns out, it was. I stepped out into a world that I quickly realized isn't my world. The differences are subtle, but they are there. Chief among them being my own mother not knowing who the hell I am. She'd apparently never had a son. Alex threatened to call the cops on me after I repeatedly showed up at his school to try and talk to him. In his defense, if some random guy walked up to me and told me that they were my best friend from another timeline, I'd probably react the same. Things haven't been easy for me, as you can probably guess. I spent 2 years sleeping on park benches and diving through dumpsters, even turned to drugs to cope with the overwhelming trauma and loneliness. I can't say that things are all well and good now, but I do have a roof over my head, which is an improvement. I don't think I'll ever be able to live a normal life, but I am trying. Hence me writing this. I don't want to be alone anymore, and the internet is the only place where I can talk about this without worrying that I'd be thrown in a padded cell. You don't have to believe me. I wouldn't believe me either, but hey, thanks for reading anyway. There's one thing in particular that I can't stop thinking about. That creepy voice called me guest 185, which implies that there were 184 guests before me. Did I escape into the reality of some other version of me that got inadvertently sucked into that place as well? You know what? Come to think of it, I don't really want to know. It's 3 a.m. An official phone alert woke me up. It says, "Do not look at the moon." I check my phone to see hundreds of notifications from different numbers. Some I don't even recognize. It read, "Look outside, it's a beautiful night." I put my phone down, feeling uneasy and wondering what is going on. I have always been paranoid and superstitious, so I decide to not look outside. I sit alone thinking about what is going on, and I start to consider if it's just some weird scam type thing. I check my phone again to make sure it's even real, which it is. Then I see a message from my mom. "Oh, honey, look outside, it's beautiful." Now I panic. Even my mom is in on this. Is this some weird prank? I text her back. "What's going on? Why should I look outside?" She replies with, "It's so pretty outside. You should take a look." At this point, I'm feeling scared and confused. Why are they telling me to look outside? I was told not to. I jump at the sound of my best friend texting me. He says, "Dude, did you get that message saying to not look outside?" This relieved me, and I told him what happened to me. The same happened to me. What's going on? Do you know what's outside? I told him that I have no clue and I'm worried. I told him my mom was texting it and everything. "That's weird," he says. Before I can text him back, there's a knock on my door. "Sweetie," I hear my mom call. I call back to her, asking if she got any weird texts. "Weird texts? I haven't got any weird texts, nope." I told her to come in so I could show her my messages, but she refused. I called out to her to ask why she can't come in, but there was no response. I called again, but there was nothing. What the hell is happening? I asked myself. Then I remembered my friend. I texted him. "Sorry, my mom was talking. She was acting really weird." "Oh, I'm glad you're back," he replied. "I wanted to tell you that I'm going to look out to see what the fuss is about." "What? No." I tell him, but he didn't respond. I waited 5 minutes, quaking in fear and worry, when eventually my phone lit up. It was my friend. I looked at the message, and it said, "Dude." I told him I was worried sick and asked him what happened. He replied with, "It's beautiful outside. You should take a look." My heart dropped. Suddenly there was a knock on my door. "Sweetie," the voice called. The door cracked open. My mom entered the room, but it wasn't my mom. It was skinny with jet black eyes. It grew a terrifying grin as it stared at me and said, "Look outside, sweetie." I screamed as it came at me. The last thing I saw was my friend telling me to look outside, and the light of the moon burned my eyes. As I stared at the bright glare of the moon, it felt like my eyeballs were being pierced by thousands of needles. I cried out as my mom held my head still, laughing. I couldn't close my eyes. It felt like the longer I stared, the more I had to keep staring. Suddenly my body felt weak. My arms and legs went limp as I felt a wave of cold rush through my body. My hands tingled. Then I felt a sharp, excruciating pain in each of my fingers. I glanced down to see them growing freakishly long. My nails grew sharp and I freaked out. I was crying for help, but all that was on the street was creatures like that was holding me still, which I was now turning into. As I watched the streets lit up by the moonlight, I noticed a tingle moving through my body, downwards. It felt a terrible pain, as if my stomach was being crushed. I watched in horror as my belly started getting thinner, my whole body stretching and morphing. I screamed until my throat felt like it was being ripped to shreds. Then it stopped. My mom let me free and I stood up. Feeling like I wasn't fully in control of my body, she looked at me, the grin wider. "Lovely, wasn't it?" she said in a hushed tone, and I noticed a tear dripping from her black eye. I tried to yell, but nothing came out. My mouth stayed shut. Then my mouth opened. Out of my control. It sure was. said a voice out of my body. It sounded like mine, but at the same time it was so different. I wasn't in control of my body, although my mind was still here. That's when I realized that my mom is in that creature. She had to watch what it did to me. I almost started crying myself. It put its arm around me, guiding me to the door. We went outside and started following the others. I watched as my neighbor came out of his house transformed. I watched as creatures entered houses and came out with the members of that house transformed. What are we going to do, Mom? I said in my mind, and then the creature beside me looked at me, as if Mom heard me. Then it looked away and walked ahead, into her old friend's house. I walked with the crowd, starting to cry. What will I do? Is this the end of humanity? Don't talk. Don't move. Don't leave your bed. 3 very simple rules. 3 rules I should have listened to. You see, the house I live in is strange. Items are never in the same place twice. A certain chill resonates down your spine. And a woman comes around at 12 a.m. every single night. My parents recently bought this house. Nothing would seem out of the ordinary. The neighbors are all very nice people. The house is spacious enough. And it was practically a steal. My parents jumped on the buy as soon as it went up for sale. Now I know why it was on sale in the first place. The previous owners seemed spooked, for lack of better words. They were in a rush to move and sold it almost immediately to my parents. They wouldn't say much about the house when I was around, but just when no one thought I was listening, they would talk. They shared every last detail in a seriousness I've never heard before. Now, I wouldn't say my family are big believers in the unexplained, but this seemed to hit them like a sack of bricks. I thought they were crazy, that they just like to tell stories for the fun of it. But then, they never looked like they were joking. It never looked made up. And so, the new rules were implemented on me. I didn't take them too seriously. Why would I? I go to bed at 10 p.m. anyway, and besides, what would an old woman do anyways? I laughed at the thought. But to appease my parents, I never left my bed at night. The days were fine. I went to school as usual, made friends, and hung out at the corner between Billy's auto and Cliffy's shoe. I made friends fast because summer was barreling down on me fast, and I was determined to not be labeled as the lonely kid. The neighborhood was fairly safe, so me and a few friends would always take our bikes and any pocket money we had and ride down to the corner and play cards. The one that stuck out to me the most was Philip. In the short 2 months I've lived here, he was the one that stuck to me fastest. Mostly because we were interested in the same things. Girls, cards, and who could get laid first. Needless to say, we were best friends. My bike tire treaded along the faded, split pavement as Philip and Julia jammered on about something or another. Do you two ever shut up? I joked. Julia gave me the finger. Oh, lay off, she deadpanned. Philip did a bunny hop with his bike. Jack, you got any gum? I took one hand off the handlebar of my dark blue BMX and patted down my pockets. Nah, but I've got leftover wintergreen. Philip scrunched his face up and shot me a weird look. No, thanks. I still can't believe you chew that stuff. It'll ruin your teeth, you know. Yeah, then you'll definitely scare people away with your missing teeth and wonder why you're still a virgin at 45. Julia chimed in, laughing as she took both hands off her handlebars to balance no-handed. I scoffed and stood up to pedal faster. Screw both of you. I gotta spend my card money on something. I grumbled. Soon the alley came into view and the 3 of us stopped, our tires hissing at us. We didn't bother to use kickstands as we rushed deeper into the alley where 2 other kids were waiting, a boy and a girl. Good, you're here. I can finally kick your asses now, the girl said. Right, like your win streak isn't totally crushed into the dark, Kayla, I said. She opened her mouth to retort, but the boy sitting next to her, Michael, cleared his throat. Just sit down and throw your money in. We each threw about $5 to $10 in the middle of the circle we formed and waited for our cards to be dealt. What game are we playing today? Philip asked. Michael furrowed a brow as he focused on shuffling. 31. Ever play it? We all gave approving hums and joked around until the brown-haired dealer was done. We each had 3 cards dealt to us and 3 placed facing up in the middle of all of us to see. Julia, being on the right of Michael, started us by swapping all 3 of her cards out. I looked at my cards, a Jack of Hearts, an 8 of Hearts, and a 3 of Spades. 18 isn't a great start, and I definitely need that winning money for a new bike. Soon it was my turn, and I looked at the 3 cards down in front. I instantly eyed the King of Hearts just waiting for me to take, so I did. Great 28 is a good enough score. So Jack, I've heard rumors about your house that it's haunted. Is it true? Kayla asked. I laughed and watched Philip take his turn, ending the round. If you want an honest answer, yes it is. It's not like anything you see on TV, no. Things just get moved around and it always feels like someone is right next to you, walking with you. We all flipped our cards to reveal our scores. Michael let out a string of curses as he realized he lost with a score of 21. Shit, I was counting on that money, he exclaimed, taking all the cards to be shuffled again. Huffing as he did so. We laughed at him as he grumbled like a child forced to eat their vegetables. Julia humored me and raised a brow. What about the woman that comes around during the night? Didn't the previous owners move out because of her? I snorted as I picked up the freshly dealt cards. Apparently, but I haven't seen her, and I guess I'm not supposed to. My parents said that I'm awake when she comes round to stay quiet. Don't move. And don't leave my bed. Philip chuckled and swapped out a 6 of diamonds for a 10 of spades. Sounds like a bunch of BS. It is, I said, taking a king of clovers in replacement of a 7 of hearts. That's when Michael, who was sitting off to the side as to not get in the way of the game, perked up and grinned. Why don't you get proof? I mean, you say she's not real, but what if she is? I thought about it, and uneasy started to pit in my stomach. I don't know why, but I didn't like it. I don't know, guys. My parents aren't too fond of that woman. Philip laughed. Have your parents even seen her? Well, no, but... Exactly. Michael's right. We could get proof of her and debunk her down to just an old hag. Or are you actually scared? Like a wuss? I sighed. I still had a boiling uneasy, but I didn't want them to think I'm scared of someone who's probably not real. I jabbed Philip in the side. Fine, but you're coming with me. Perfect. He grinned. Philip and I walked into my house, which instantly gave me the chills. Mom, I'm home. My mom came out of the kitchen with a rag draped over her shoulder. She had a soft smile and caring eyes. Oh, sweetheart, you brought a friend? Yeah, his name's Philip. Can he stay the night? I asked, crossing my fingers for luck. My mom went stiff as her breath caught. She walked over to us, her eyes still somewhat soft. Do your parents know, honey? She asked him. He nodded with a smile. Yep, I'm greenlit for the night. She exhaled and ushered him towards the dining table. Then she looked at him with a hand on my shoulder. She squeezed it tight. Do not stay up past 12, do you hear me? I felt the unease rush back up my throat. I don't know if it was her grip or the momentous glare behind her usual soft greens, but my palms became sweaty and a lump formed in my esophagus. I swallowed thickly and plastered on an easy smile. Mom, you can trust me, okay? She let go of my shoulder and sighed, rubbing her temple. Yes, of course I am. I'm just being paranoid. I mean, who even knows if she's real, right? She chuffed a laugh and walked back into the kitchen. I joined Philip and waited with him. Soon, my dad joined us, and the four of us ate dinner and talked about mundane things. I grumbled about losing at cards while Philip laughed at my expense. Both of us ate dinner pretty quick, so we would have time to mess around before that night. After our plates were whisked away, we dashed to my room. Do you know the history on the woman? Philip asked, sitting down at the foot of my bed. I shrugged, sitting down on a red beanbag I had in the corner of my room. Only that she's been around a while and scared away all the tenants that lived here. I took off my jacket and stretched out over the beanbag. I guess she comes around pleading for help, and if you so much as breathe too loud, she comes for you. Philip seemed to mull over the information as his brow furrowed in thought. So, what if we record her? Like, just prove she's a deranged old woman and get her sent away. I mean, what is she going to do? She'd pop a hip trying to get us. I laughed at the thought and nodded. Doesn't sound like a bad idea, actually. I sat up and popped my back. So, wanna play on my console or something? Philip stretched his arms out above his head. Yeah, start it up. We gamed for a few hours until it was about 10 p.m. My dad knocked on the door and opened it a crack. Boys? Yeah, Dad? He stepped in. You might want to head to bed soon, he said, giving me a hard look. I groaned. We will, Dad. No need to stroke out. He huffed and crossed his arms. Don't give me that. Just go to bed soon, alright? Okay. Alright. Good night, both of you. We said our good nights, and I could feel the anticipation in my veins. I was still heavily uneasy, but that's normal, right? A chill ran down my spine, shaking me to my core. It felt different. Nothing physically changed, but an atmosphere was thickly lying down on us. Philip, you feel that? Philip craned his neck over in my direction. Feel what? You're going crazy. I blew it off as I shook my head. Nothing. Forget it. What's the time? He reached in his pocket to fish out his phone. 10:36. We've got some time. Wanna hop back on the game? No, let's just chill. 1 hour and a half was all it took. Just 1 hour and a half. My heart was thumping so loud I was sure Philip could hear it. Midnight struck as Philip pulled out his phone to record the woman. It was dark, the only light being my phone flashlight. My stomach was to my knees as almost instantly a woman came out of nowhere. But she didn't look normal. She was hunched over, had black where her eye whites should go, scraggly gray hair, and her skin. God, her skin. What was left of it was a discolored gray. It was falling off in chunks as her talon-like fingernails beat on my window. She wore no clothes, and her bones were visible in spotty blotches. Help! Help me! He's coming! She screamed. Her voice was otherworldly. It was as if someone distorted a dying dog's yelp. Me and Philip were frozen. My heart thumped in my ears as the blood rushed to my head. Philip's long-forgotten phone clattered to the ground as we stood shocked. What the hell? I stammered, unable to breathe. Philip seemed to regain his senses because he clenched his fist. Hey, woman, get the hell out of here. You hear me? Leave. He yelled, his voice bouncing off the walls in a panicked rasp. The woman stopped beating on the window and grinned maliciously. She took a talon and put it up to her lips in the universal shush motion. Shh. She blew out, and instantly Philip's mouth was forcibly closed and he started choking. His face went beet red as he clawed at his throat, trying to cough or scream or something. He wouldn't say a thing. He fell to his knees choking. The veins in his neck popped out and his face was terribly red. I tried to scream or move, but I couldn't. The invisible force was holding me still. My eyes flickered to the woman as she laughed, so maniacally. Her distortion rang through the surrounding trees as she doubled over. Tears freely flowed like a broken faucet. I couldn't speak. I tried to thrash around and move something, anything, but no matter my efforts, I wouldn't budge. Then Philip dropped. No more struggle, no more coughing, no more of anything. He was dead. I wanted to scream, cry, and vomit as I looked at the sadistic woman smiling. Then she winked at me and snapped her finger. It went impossibly dark. When I was able to see again, it was broad daylight. I was laying on my bed and I had a raging headache. I sat and wondered for a second. I could almost pass everything off as a horrible nightmare. Almost. I saw the shine of a phone on the floor. I got up and picked it up to inspect it. Philip. It was undoubtedly his phone as the lock screen displayed me and him. Events of the night before rushed back in on caring spirits as tears sprung me again. I couldn't breathe. Everything was in a haze as my blood started to pump again. I ran out of my room, stumbling out on the hallway wall. Mom, Dad, Mom, please. I begged, breaths ripping in and out. My mom and dad rushed into the hallway and gasped at me. Jack, honey, what's wrong? My mom asked, putting her arms onto my shoulders. My dad stood next to her, worried eyes trailing me up and down. I heaved for air, saliva running down my chin. I'm sorry. Mom, please. I'm sorry. I cried into her chest. Sorry for what? What did you do? My dad asked. Me and Philip looked at the woman and now he's dead. My mom pulled away from me to look me in the eyes. Honey, who's Philip? I sniffled, snot shooting back up my nose. What? My parents shared uneasy glances. Jack, who's Philip? My mom said again. My head twisted as confusion bubbled up. You met him last night. He's my best friend. No, Jack, we know no one by that name. Are you feeling alright? My dad put his hand to my forehead. I jerked away, looking between them. My vision spun as nothing was making sense. You guys are crazy, I yelled, running back into my room, slamming the door locked. I fell to my knees and cried. My throat burned and my eyes felt stiff and sore. Philip was real. Philip is real. He had to be. But then where did he go? He just vanished with that thing. Whatever that thing was, she wasn't human. I pulled out my phone and sent rapid texts to all my friends asking about Philip. All of them giving me similar answers. Who the hell is Philip? Every single one of them asked. I threw my phone against the wall in a fit of rage. How had they suddenly just forgotten my best friend? I was slumped against the walls, exhausted. My head fell to my knees as I fell asleep. That leads me to now. It's been 2 days since that incident. I haven't slept or left my room at all. I'm holding out hope that Philip will reappear, but every time the woman comes, she just sits and laughs for hours. Then as quickly as she comes, she leaves even faster. Whatever she did to Philip was grotesque, and one day I'll know. But for now, I wish to say to all of you, never look at the woman in the window. I swear I'm going crazy. I can't breathe. It all started 2 months ago when I was walking to the bus stop. I live alone at the end of a road surrounded by the forest. Between my house and the main road is a cemetery. This cemetery is hundreds of years old. In fact, it is abandoned. No one visits the cemetery. Even the family of those buried there are long gone. Every time I need to walk past the cemetery to the bus stop, I make it brief. It's creepy. On this particular day, I needed to grab some groceries. As I'm walking by the cemetery, I hear a blood-curdling scream. Help me. At this point, I'm booking it and not looking back. I don't screw with the paranormal. On my way back from the grocery store, it's dark and I'm walking back to my house. I make it in safely and I didn't hear any more screams. Almost a week goes by and no screaming. Until Friday. I was making my way to the bus stop. It's about 7 a.m. I'm walking by the cemetery and hear a little boy crying in a dry, raspy voice. Please, someone, help me. I'm so scared. I decided to walk into the cemetery. Everything feels off. I feel like I'm being watched. I hear where the voice is coming from and kneel next to his grave. Jack L. Thompson, born 1798, died 1806. The poor boy was only 8. I say a prayer for him in my head and make my way to the grocery store. I'm back home and still can't help but feel like I'm being watched. Weeks pass by and every time I pass the cemetery I hear screams and cries of agony. I feel like I'm going crazy. Then I hear it. A knock on my door. It's a man. He's in a panic. Can you please help me with my car? He pleaded. I took a wrong turn and I ended up next to the cemetery and I keep hearing screaming. I think the spirits are mad at me. He cried. I was in shock. Not crazy. Alright, don't worry. I'll get you out of there in no time. I give him a reassuring smile. I get my tools and we head down to his car. Well, it's your tire. Do you have a spare? I asked. I'll get it. Thank you so much for helping me. He said. Then we heard it. A woman's voice screaming. They're really mad, he says shakingly. He began to say a prayer. He gives me the tire from his trunk. I put it on and go to put the damaged tire in his trunk. I see a shovel with blood on it. I drop the tire as the impact from a wrench hits my head and sends needles running down my neck. I remember my knees hitting the ground. I'm awake. I swear I'm going crazy. I can't breathe. I'm screaming and crying for help. Confined to this coffin. I didn't think monsters were real. Until now, that is. It's kind of hard to deny their existence after you've survived an attack by werewolves. How I got myself into this situation? I decided to go on a cruise. I was expecting to meet some strange people, but nothing like this. Long story short, a pack of werewolves was among the passengers, and they decided the rest of us looked pretty tasty, so they started eating the other passengers. Well, in human form, they had convinced some passengers to play some game with them. Don't know what. Apparently they were pretty good, and a largish crowd gathered to watch them play. I happened to be a certain distance from the crowd. I was sunbathing, and I happened to doze off when I was suddenly awoken by screams and shrieks. At first, I was annoyed. I thought, what could possibly be so exciting? Then I saw the crowd dispersing and getting attacked. It took a while until it registered what was happening. Finally, I just found myself running in the same direction as everybody else without understanding why. Instinct of self-preservation, I guess. As I was running, I turned and looked back for a moment, and I saw one of the werewolves pouncing on some poor kid. I was horrified, but I couldn't stop. I had to pick up speed. Problem was, there were a lot of panicked people around, running frenetically in all directions. I managed together with some of the other passengers to enter the dining hall and block the door as well as we could. Now, the interesting part was, these weren't your Hollywood type werewolves. They weren't active only at night, but, as I already mentioned, also by day. In fact, I suspect they could change at will, but I wasn't able to confirm or disprove this idea of mine, as once they turned into wolf form, they didn't change back. They look a bit like Hollywood werewolves, though. They were anthropomorphic looking wolves. Actually, they looked like a skinny bear standing on two legs. We were able to hear howling and scratching from behind the door. Luckily, our makeshift barricade held, at least for now. But I had time to evaluate my situation. I panicked even more. I started to hyperventilate. I was seriously considering the possibility that I was not going to make it. Not only that, but I thought of my parents and how devastated they would be. I even imagined my mom wailing and mourning me. As I was their only child, they would never have any grandchildren. They wouldn't have anything to remember me by. Just a few clothes and a few empty bottles of gin I had forgotten to throw away. Not only that, but since I'd gotten myself eaten by monsters, they wouldn't even have a body to bury. I looked around me and everybody was just as terrified and worried as me. Until I noticed Carl in the corner sipping a damn cup of tea as calmly as possible. He didn't even seem to notice the surrounding commotion. Carl was also one of the passengers. He was a tall, elderly gentleman. He looked in excellent health. In fact, you could even describe him as ripped. Carl wasn't popular with the other passengers. I think I was the only one who bothered to talk to him, or he bothered to talk to. If the guy didn't like you, he would flat out ignore you. He spent all his time alone, sitting somewhere in the Peace Suite and stroking his long white beard, or playing with his ponytail and observing the other passengers. Carl was from somewhere in Eastern Europe. He wasn't married and didn't have any children. What he did for a living, he refused to tell me, but he was a very educated man. He was very knowledgeable in matters of science, history, and philosophy. When he saw me, he gestured me to go to him. I did. What's going on? Werewolves, man. Werewolves. I know it sounds crazy, but... Werewolves, He interrupted as if it was the most mundane thing ever. You really should try the tea. It helps calm the nerves. How can you talk of tea at a time like this? Well, they also have liquor, if you prefer that. No, I would rather... I was interrupted by the sound of the door breaking down. The beasts burst in, but stopped when they noticed Carl and me. Carl didn't even flinch, but the werewolves were positively terrified of him. If you ever had a dog, you are familiar with the body language. Tail tucked between the legs, head down, trying to look as small as possible, whining. You know, I really don't appreciate it when your kind bothers me on vacation, said Carl, annoyed. The werewolves didn't wait for him to say another word and ran away. Carl stood up and walked away in his usual, calm manner. The monsters were found later in their human form with their stomachs burst from the inside. There was no sign of Carl. To this very day, I have no idea what happened. When the authorities arrived, they concluded the drinks must have been spiked. The passengers suffered from mass delusions and started attacking each other. I don't blame them. The rational person tries to explain the unexplainable. Our story seemed crazy, so of course it must be wrong, mustn't it? No arrests were made. Of course they weren't. The real culprits were among the dead bodies, under mysterious circumstances. Daddy, did you hear the man last night? My 8-year-old son asked. I was in the middle of making a light breakfast on an early Saturday morning. Buttered toast and a small plate of scrambled eggs to go with it. I turned around to face him, a spatula in hand. What man? I asked. In the back of my mind, he was obviously telling me about a dream, or had overheard me from my bedroom talking to my wife. who happened to be on a business trip. He was screaming very loudly. He was outside my window, he said, big blue eyes staring up at me curiously. My stomach pitted, as if it were emptying out onto the ground. A cold dread began to fill it like sludge. It wasn't only the idea of him hearing a man, but the fact that the man had been screaming outside my son's window, which happened to be multiple feet off the ground. I started running through the list, trying to find a reason why my son would possibly lie to me. What was he saying? I asked. I put the spatula down and sat next to him. It was the least I could do to humor myself. He was screaming at me and asking me to help him. He kept telling me to help him over and over again. It was scary. My son replied, I'm sure it was. And I rubbed his arm softly. But he disappeared after. My son finished and he took a big bite of his cereal bar. Where do you think he went? I don't know, but his screams kind of just faded away. It took a while for it to stop. I could still hear it from far away. I bit my lip, thinking, out of all the things he'd said, that one got to me the most. The screams, fading. Granted, my son does have quite the imagination, but to add the fact that the man's screams faded away, slowly, added a disturbing detail to an otherwise banal lie. Well, I said, standing up, I hope he doesn't come back, or else I'll knock his block off. I tousled his hair and went back to making my breakfast. Oh, I don't think he'll be coming back, my son replied. I stopped, turning back to him. I tried to look for a hint of smile. I waited for him to say, gotcha, with a big grin spreading across his innocent face. But all I found was my 8-year-old son, biting aimlessly on his cereal bar, staring out the kitchen window, oddly enough. I took a deep breath, trying to push it to the back of my mind, but it kept coming back to me throughout the morning, and by late evening, it was all I could think about. So, I did what any father might do. For a brief moment, I considered what my son said to be true, and went to the garage and grabbed a ladder. Where are you going, Daddy? My son asked from the fence gate. I'm going to look for that man outside your window, I replied, hoisting the ladder against the side of the house. You won't find him there. Why not? 'Cause he isn't anywhere. He's gone. I laughed and told him to go inside, and eventually he did. A trickle of discomfort passed through me. Kids, I thought. They can be really creepy sometimes. At first, I wasn't looking for anything. In the back of my mind, I still believed that all of this was a lie. Some nightmare my son had conjured and relayed to me as if it were reality. I climbed up the steps on the ladder. The brick wall climbed up and up and up with me until I was at my son's window. I cupped my hands to my eyes, blocking the sun, and looking through the window. It was easy enough to see almost everything. I could see his bed clearly, and I imagined him sleeping there, peacefully in the dark. I imagined the man peering in through the same window, his face turned into a grotesque caricature, screaming at my son. A chill passed down my back and through my body. I assured myself that it was a dream, but a part of me still wanted to make sure. I scanned the ledge of the window for marks, any kind. I ran my hand across it, seeing if hair would stick to my hand, or if any belongings might have dropped there, but I found nothing. I started to laugh. In spite of myself, I knew when I got back inside, my son would be laughing hysterically. I began my descent down the ladder, and that was when I found the skid marks. At first they looked like black streaks, something that would be mistaken for filthy runoff water, staining the wall, but this was not the case. The skid marks were in line, one after another, no doubt the marks of shoes climbing. I climbed back up the ladder slowly, following the marks up to the window once again where they stopped. I checked around the ledge once again, but this time I took it a step further, examining the inside near the screen over the window. That's when I saw the scratch marks. Tons of them. Jagged and torn across the flimsy metal. Blood had dried across it, crusty and black. That was when I realized. Something in the back of my throat rose, but I swallowed it down. The skid marks on the wall, the scratches on the screen. The man was crying for help. This was certain. Something had been trying to take him, dragging him down as he climbed up. He'd been hanging on for life, begging my son, pleading, helpless. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I leaned my head back and looked at the sky, the clouds, the vast expanse of blue wonder. My eyes fell from the sky down to the roof, to the brick wall. I stopped. Above the window, only a few feet away from my shutters, was a black stripe. Not just one, but many. A row of them. Skid marks. Shoe marks. I followed them down and down all the way to my son's window, and further down until they met the ones that led up to the window. A single line of marks, made from the shoes of a man desperate for life. My eyes looked back toward the top of the house. Tracing back the steps, I followed the marks again to the window. More blood, but this time, it was at the top of the window, falling up and splattered over ever so slightly across the bricks, turning the cement between the edges a dark brown. The blood continued on up, disappearing completely beyond the roof, just as the shoe marks had. With my legs shaking, I began my descent down the ladder, keeping my eyes glued to the brick wall, noticing the small smudges of brown between the bricks. I finally reached the ground, throwing up in a pile of bushes near the corner of the house. My knees kept shaking, a cold shudder making its way through me. I stepped back a ways from the house to gain a full picture. Skid marks, blood on the bricks, leading up and up to the window. Scratches and more blood on the screen, leading up and up to the top of the house and disappearing forever. Of course he wasn't being dragged down, I thought, because he hadn't been going down at all. My son appeared in front of the window then, and he stared out across the backyard and spotted me and waved. I didn't wave back. I stood out there for God knows how long, studying the picture before me. I pictured the man, maybe the color of his eyes or his hair. How old had he been? My age? What had he been doing out so late at night? How had he found himself in my backyard? How had he found himself being dragged up the side of my house, screaming, crying, his fingernails being whittled away by the bricks, the blood streaming across them as he pleaded for his life? How had he found himself in front of my son's window, screaming at a helpless child for what it lacked in return, as if he might save him? And as the sun faded in the distance, the sky turning from orange to purple to black, the moon covered by an array of clouds, casting not even a shadow upon my house, I wondered where the man had been dragged up to. I wondered as the clouds parted, the moon shining its terrible lights upon my house, what had dragged him up there? What had dragged him up to those endless depths, where silence lay steadily across the bottomless pit of stale darkness? And for a moment, I wonder if I'll be able to see it. Can you? Right there. Can you see it? A child sprinting down a desolate street to retrieve his rogue ball. A mother beckoning him inside for supper. A father rolling into the driveway and shining, fresh off the lot convertible. It was the first thing we saw after finding the house. Tom's face turned beet red as he looked out the window of our aging sedan. A swig from a whiskey bottle and incoherent mumbling proceeded. "They'll regret it all," he snarled after bashing his fist against the steering wheel, accidentally setting off the horn. The mother of the child was the only one who seemed to notice, and with a rapid flash in her expression, she beckoned her son inside hurriedly. Fear. It was clear as day in her eyes, and her son's. I don't want to remember that look. The slam of a door turned my attention to the driver's side of the car, which was now bare. Tom was storming towards the house in what I sensed was an embodiment of hell's wrath. Quickly, I popped out of the car and ran up to him. With quick, shallow breaths, I grabbed his arm to prevent the bloodbath that would ensue if he entered the house. Tommy, I don't want to hear it. You know damn well what they have done. We can't change the past, but I can damn well change the future. He wrenched his arm away from my grasp and continued his parade of death towards that cursed door. The door to the house that had sent our lives into a spiral of excruciating pain and despair. The house which now sheltered our son, or at least, what's left of him. The day our only child entered under the forsaken roof is one that neither Tom nor I would care to remember. But every living moment the horrid acts we witnessed loop in our heads. We had just been glad our little Jack had made some friends. The red flags ran rampant, yet we were blinded by our own hands. The sheer fact that not once did we meet the boy he talked about so much. It was just like any other day. Jack skipped our house completely to hang out with the nameless child. We had grown used to this. As all young kids strive for independence, boundaries had been set, but they were followed loosely. We told him to call at least once a day if he was away from home. He would call occasionally, which helped blunt the edge of our worries. Then the calls changed. Rapid, consecutive calls until Tom or I picked up. The radio silence on the other end after doing so. This would happen 3 or 4 times a day, until Jack would finally talk on the other line. When we questioned about the relentless ghost calls, he claimed to have no recollection of doing such. We chalked it down to a phone malfunction. Finally, the phone didn't stop ringing for hours. Hours and hours of constant ringing with the exception of when we answered it. Strange noises could be heard from the other end, but the call would always disconnect after 4 or 5 seconds. As soon as it would end, it began to ring again. We grew worried fairly fast, as it was the first time noises could be heard after the so-called glitch ghost calls. Jack had mentioned the address of his new friend over dinner a couple of days prior to this. It was only a block away, and we grew a false sense of assurance as we reside in a fairly nice part of town. Tom and I finally broke after 3 hours of the forsaken calls. With a panic that sunk in deeper with every mile, we finally arrived at the address Jack had given us. Relief fell upon us as it was one of the nicest houses in the area, with a playground in the back showing signs of kids. Tom had agreed to just roll by, as we didn't want to be the helicopter parents you hear so much about. As we turned around to head back home, I decided to roll down the window for some fresh air. After all, we had decompressed a little. As soon as I did, the car screeched to a stop and we ran towards the house. The screams of our child screaming could not be mistaken. Medical beds, scalpels, sterilized gloves, an IV. Jack looked back at us from across the room, strapped to a table. I blacked out. Tom told me I had run outside and began to simultaneously throw up and weep upon the yard. Men rushed from the upstairs of the house yelling, brandishing knives of every kind. Jack yelled out to us, begging us to save him. Tom picked me up and ran to the car. We shouldn't have deserted Jack, but the sight of a rat tunneling out of the stump that would be bearing a leg and coolers filled to the brim with bloody plastic bags told us all we needed to know. There was no saving our boy. The police had arrived about 30 minutes later. The house was spotless, just like the realtor had left it for the showing. There were no signs of life in the inferno that took our son. Life went on. Tom and I shifted our love to alcohol. We lost our jobs and moved back in with my mother. Our lives had ended right along with Jack's. Mother forced us to attend a dinner party with some new friends she had made from the church. Her house, her rules after all. Begrudgingly, we got ourselves presentable for the first time in months. Formalities and small talk. But Tom and I remained distant from the chatter. But I couldn't stop looking at one of the children that had come to the dinner. His eyes. They were almost identical to Jack's eyes. They had the same hazy gray color, with a shifty glance that always looked alert. Tom whispered in my ear and knocked me out of my daze. He directed my attention to the boy's sister, whose nose looked oddly familiar. Their father's hair, the mother's ears. Jack. Our precious Jack. We found out where they lived. I didn't want to go. Tom insisted. I'm writing this in the car, ignoring the cries of agony that are coming from the house. He's not letting them off easy. It seems we are getting Jack back. Piece by piece. Let me set the stage for you. So this happened 3 years ago. I was 13 male, currently 16. It was 2 a.m. and it was storming like crazy, and me and my brother, 15, and my dad, 38, decided to chill in the living room and watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy, as it was our rainy day tradition. My mother, 37, was out of town for a business trip, and my sister, 3, was asleep in her bed. We got about halfway through the second movie before the power inevitably went out. Thinking it was just the rain, my dad decides to check the fuse box in our backyard, so I tag along. We arrive at the fuse box and the big wires have been cut in half. This freaked me out, but my dad just concluded that it was just some asshole neighbor kids. While me and my dad were outside at the fuse box getting drenched, we heard a loud bang, and shortly after, my brother runs out of our back door, looking panicked. Me and my dad run to his aid, but the only words he could muster were, "In the house. There is someone in the house." My dad runs for the door that my brother had just ran out of. But, by all of our surprise, it was locked. This scared the hell out of us, as my 3-year-old sister was fast asleep in her bed. My dad runs to the front door, but it was locked too. My dad then received a phone call from a number that said, "No caller ID." My dad picks up the phone and we all hear this loud, twisted, sinister laugh that still spooks me to my core every time I think about it. The goofy voice on the other side of the phone then said, "How is the rain out there?" My dad, stunned by the voice, hollered over the phone, "What do you want?" The voice said, "I'm going to make this really simple for you. I want you to get me $2,800 or I will kill your daughter." Just as he said this to my dad, a photo went through to his phone of my baby sister in her bed with a black 9mm pointed at her. What the hell were we supposed to do? Go to the ATM while there was a crazy man in our house, holding our baby sister at gunpoint? It wasn't an option. We were all standing at our back door where there is also a window, and then suddenly, the man draws the curtains and we see him wearing a dark green Unabomber jacket, dirty brown pants, and a black ski mask pulled up just enough to reveal his mouth where he was wearing the biggest, scariest smile that haunts me to this day. He closed the curtains and then ended the call with my dad. To this day, my dad and my brother will never know why, but at that moment, we hear a loud door slam from the inside of our house, and we saw the man darting down our street, leaving our house, and we haven't seen him since. I have no idea why he left. Did he get cold feet? Did his conscience finally get him? Or did he remember that he left the stove on in his house? I have absolutely no idea. We ran into the house and saw that my sister was still fast asleep. My dad called 911 and quickly told them everything that happened, and 11 minutes later, 2 officers arrive. We gave them a description of the man, showed them the fuse box where he cut the wires, and my dad answered all of their questions, and then the police officers left. My dad called my mom to tell her about everything that went down, and it wasn't exactly the most pleasant conversation in the world. Since then, we have moved houses. My dad changed his number, and my sister still has no idea what happened on that stormy night 3 years ago. The smiling man, as he is most commonly referred to as in my house, has ruined so much for me. Whenever I close my eyes, I see him. Whenever I am in silence, I hear that horrific laugh that makes me want to throw up. He even ruined Lord of the Rings for me. I haven't heard anything about that man since that fateful night in 2019, and I have no idea if he was caught or not, but since then, he has been the star of all my nightmares. I know that I'm not the best writer in the world, but I just wanted to tell someone about the man that is ruining my life. I can't make any of this up. None of my friends or family will believe me. They think I'm dreaming. You'll believe me, right? I'm scared, shocked, guilty, confused. 3 nights ago, I went to the psych ward with a group of camp members to volunteer in visiting the kids that were there, and to give them some money that we raised. When we arrived, the nurse assigned me room 93. Inside, there was a girl that was very lonely. She told me that the girl was horribly ill, and they couldn't do anything to save her, so they left her to her fate and didn't bother visiting often as it was pointless. I felt bad and I went in. Room 93 was very vacant. No nightstand, no rug, no comfort. Just gray walls, a small window with a boring view of the rooftop next door, a chair in the corner of the room, and a hospital bed with many machines and heart monitors. And in the bed, there she was. I didn't know her name, but we talked, even if I was too afraid to at first. She told me things like how when nobody was with her, nothing mattered. But when I was there, something did. She also hated being alone, how she was a prisoner to this ward and her fate, how she wished she was free. She told me about how when people visit, it's not often she will see them again, and how heart-wrenching it is to see them walk out the door while she just lays there. And that's how her abandonment issues started. She begged me to please not leave, even after visiting hours. I couldn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. I felt as if I was too afraid to speak, so I only nodded at her request and sat in the chair that was provided at the corner of the room for many hours until it was time to go. There were very few moments where I would stand and go to her. At one point, she would talk about how loneliness got to her, and how she was always afraid of people visiting because she knew they'd leave. Once again, she begged me not to leave and that she didn't want to die alone. I could only nod again. I felt horrible for her. A young teenager, so ill to the point no nurse nor doctor would go in and check on her. Her fate was actually sealed. There was no way out. Even if there was a tiny chance, it was impossible. The only thing for her to progress was to die. I stayed for 4 to 5 more hours, until I understood why the other visitors had left and how the girl felt. My entire camp had left me there in this hospital. I guess they forgot about me. I'd have to walk home. I was getting sick and bored of staying here, and every time I walked up to the girl, she would only ask me to not leave, and I'd nod. It was a loop, and sometimes it felt like I was the one being abandoned in my deathbed and not her. I didn't want to leave her, but I couldn't stay here forever. Another hour had passed until I finally got up and went to the door, and she immediately called to me, asking where I was going, and begged me to stay. It was too much. I couldn't say anything to her. I didn't want to. Cold sweat ran down my face as I grabbed for the handle, and she continued to beg me not to leave. She mentioned not wanting to die alone again, and I only heard a slight, "I'll miss you," as I left. But those were the last words I heard from her before I left the room. When I came outside, the lights of the entire hospital were still on. My eyes flashed with colors as I had been sitting in a nearly dark room for hours, newly adjusting to the brightness. I noticed two of the nurses giving me looks of pity and unreadable discomfort, but they immediately walked away once I looked back at them. I was too tired to question it, so I just went for the front door and walked home until my feet felt like they were about to fall off. That night, when I finally returned home, everything hit me at once. The guilt for leaving the girl there to her fate as if she already wasn't dying. The thought of her having no one. The thought of her just being in that empty room. The opportunities she would have had if she never got sick. I decided I'd return to her the next day. Part of me wanted to get her out of there, but that part of me instantly shattered when I realized that just wasn't possible. I could barely sleep that night. All I could think of was the guilt and shame I had of leaving her. It was overwhelming. And if she was going to die alone because I couldn't tolerate just falling asleep in a chair and staying until morning, I would be absolutely furious with myself. I managed to get a few hours of sleep, but at 6 in the morning I woke up and rushed to the ward again. The receptionist only gave me a weird, disgusted look at why I was in such a panic. I explained to her I needed to go to room 93 as soon as possible, and that I would be visiting every day from now on. The receptionist stared at me as if I was a bug, and I wanted to rush her even more until she told me something I'll never forget. "Sir, there is no room 93 here." Drops of salty, shiny sweat beads formed on my forehead as I finalized my second last subject in college for the fall semester. Being an international student, I had no idea how the college course enrollment system worked. What I learned was that I needed a minimum of 13 credits and had to enroll in my classes online but had to attend them physically. I was done with enrolling in classes worth 12 credits and had chosen all the subjects I truly wanted to study. So, I just needed 1 credit and decided to take up a course with a light load. I wanted a subject that would require the least amount of effort. My dry fingers typed and scrolled furiously as I tried looking up subjects with low credits. Then my hands paused. I let out a huge sigh and pushed my laptop away. Deciding to take a break from the frustrating work, I lay on the bed. My laptop screen was still open in front of me, shining a little too bright for my tired eyes. My eyelids got heavier and I struggled to handle their weight. Before I knew it, I had taken a 3-hour-long nap. Shit. I whispered in a croaky, broken voice as I woke up and reached out for my phone, still groggy and half asleep. I saw the laptop screen, which was now completely blank from being in sleep mode, and so was I. While I was switching my laptop back on, an idea struck my head. What if I just Googled the easiest course available, along with the name of my university? I wouldn't have to individually check the credit system and course load for each subject. I quickly typed the name of my university followed by the question where I misspelled subject as subject. But fortunately, Google realized what I was trying to ask. The first few search results were completely unrelated, but the 4th result was from Reddit. It was an archived Reddit thread in which someone had asked the same question as me. There was only one answer, which had the subject code 191X8G. That was it. No mention of the subject name or context. However, my still half-asleep brain got what it wanted. I went back to the tab where my college course enrollment website was open and typed the subject code. The code was accepted, and guess what? It was a 1-credit course. I pumped my fist in the air, and without even seeing the name of the course, subject, or any other information, I hit the enroll button. 3 months later, I was on campus ready to meet and mingle with my new college mates. In the busy weeks before my arrival, I'd completely forgotten to check my class schedule. When I finally did glance through it, one class stuck out. Fear Psychology Practical was the name of the class, and it was taught by Dr. S. Brown. The reason it stuck out to me was not because of the name, but because of the class timing. Friday, 9:30 p.m. I was taken aback temporarily, but that was only till I saw that I only had to attend 3 lectures on the subject in the entire semester. I became glad and relaxed. I didn't look up any other information on the course because I thought that if Reddit says something is easy, then who am I to argue? So in my blissfully unaware state, I started college and even had some sweet friends. I sort of started to understand what our early human ancestors who traveled far to migrate to new continents must have felt like. If you dream of being in a world completely different from where you are born, who knows, you might just experience it. It was all stuff of movies, minus the student debt, which kept me grounded. Before I knew it, Friday had arrived, and after explaining to all my confused college mates that their party plans crashed with my class schedule, I was on the bus to attend Dr. S. Brown's class. Campus glowed differently in the night light, and took me 20 minutes to find the building mentioned in the schedule. I rushed to the new building, which I had never seen before. The moment I stepped into the building, I felt different. It was like the feeling of watching sci-fi movies, listening to glitches in the Matrix stories, experiencing thundering rain, or, to describe it more accurately, being in a dream. The lighting of the building was so different that I don't even have the words to describe it. The walls were yellow, but unlike any shade of yellow I've seen before or since. You'd think you've seen all yellows that the world has, but no. You won't find this yellow on a computer color scale. This thing was from elsewhere, or at least that's how I felt when I saw it. I looked at my schedule again. The 13th floor. I looked at the elevator and suddenly, the dreamlike, out-of-the-world feeling was infected with a different feeling. You know you're scared when you go to a new place and adjust to a new environment. There is always this small sense of nervousness and fear. I had carried that feeling when I came to college, but the moment I looked at the elevator, I felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of new fear. It was as if I had watched a horror movie and was scared that I'd be attacked by a grotesque being, but this description doesn't do the feeling justice because this fear was more profound and silent. I felt so clearly, and yet there was no logic for this fear to exist. I looked around and saw the stairs. I'd be lying if I said that the stairs looked any more appealing than the elevator, but I knew if I didn't walk up those stairs, I'd be standing in that hallway for eternity from that paralyzing fear. So, I took fast but unsure steps towards the ancient-looking marbly stairs. Before I took my first step up, I looked back at the elevator. The floor sign lit up and soft elevator music started to play, indicating that the lift was coming to the floor I was on. As the music got louder, so did the pounding of my heart. All I knew at that moment was that I did not want to see the doors of that elevator open, and so I ran up the stairs as fast as I could. The further I went up, the dimmer the lights got. By the time I got to the 10th floor, it was pitch black. I couldn't see anything. Again, the darkness was such a different kind of dark. I was now very scared and questioned the entire idea of going to class. I could still go back. How was there no one in the building? I looked below at the dizzying curves of the 10 floors I had already climbed. The staircase seemed scarier from up top. I looked at my phone and took a deep breath. Nope, that doesn't just happen in movies, because I actually physically stood there and took 3 deep breaths. Everyone was probably already in class. If I didn't make it to class in the next 15 minutes, I'd be late and lose my attendance. This was supposed to be a blow-off class, and I couldn't let this stupid feeling, take away my credit. The class was most probably a night school thing, and so the number of students wouldn't be that high. I told myself I was scared about nothing. This was just like going to the living room as a kid after turning off the lights and getting back to bed. As a kid, I'd start imagining a demon following me and scare myself for no reason. It was natural for me to be scared about navigating a new place all by myself, but that was what I signed up for when I decided to attend university in a new country. I turned on the flashlight of my phone and started walking up. I decided not to look around and get this over with as soon as possible. I had only gone up 2 or 3 steps when I heard what I thought was another pair of footsteps. They matched the rhythm and speed of mine, but they were definitely not my footsteps. Oh, hell no. I whispered under my breath and started to run. The footsteps behind me were running too. There was no way I was going to look back, and so before I knew it, and obviously this was going to happen because, well, I'm me, and so I tripped while running. The footsteps behind me stopped too. My phone fell with me and slid a little further than my hand's reach. The flash was still on, and it lit up the sign in front of me. The 11th floor. I then heard a small footstep not that far off behind me. It was a tiny footstep followed by another. My heart felt like it would explode and I thought I was going to die. Another small footstep. But I was stuck in my position with fear. I wanted to get up, but I was just too scared to move. My fingers and arm hurt from the position they were in, but I couldn't even move my fingernail. The small single footsteps got louder all of a sudden, and then they started running. I felt a strong arm grab my foot. I screamed out loud and felt myself getting pulled behind. I grabbed the railing and kicked back as strongly as I could. As soon as I felt the grip on my foot ease, I got up and continued running upstairs. I picked up my phone but still couldn't dare to look behind me at who or what had grabbed me. I was now breathing faster than ever. I couldn't hear the footsteps following, but I knew my nose was bleeding and my arms were scratched up too. The legs that had been pulled hard also burned and was probably bruised, but there was no time to check. Just 2 more floors and I could get to class, aka get to safety. I rushed up the stairs, but this time not only did I hear the mirroring, double footsteps again, which now for some reason felt like there were more than one behind me, but also the steps for the 12th floor were wet. Not like slippery and not dry from mopping wet, but like someone's throwing down buckets of water wet. A small light lit up in the corner of my eye. It was the elevator that was coming to the 11th floor. I could faintly hear the elevator music too. Seeing the gushing water coming down from the 12th floor, I recognized going up the stairs. Taking the elevator could possibly be faster and my chances of tripping or falling would be slimmer too. However, whoever was behind me could catch up if I tried to go toward the elevator. I had to take that decision in a split second. I took one look at the creepy elevator and started going up the stairs. My pace was slower, but I still went up as fast as I could. Despite the sound of flowing water, I could still hear splashes of steps going at the same pace as mine behind me. I wanted to cry then, but I didn't have the time or opportunity to process whatever was happening. I just had to get to class. I was gripping the railing of the staircase hard so as to not fall, but had a tighter death grip on my phone. I somehow made it halfway when I saw a rough outline of a figure on the 12th floor. My heart sank, and I felt like I'd puke. I stopped for a second, but the splashing sounds behind me did not. I knew it would only be seconds before whoever was behind me caught up. I only had 2 options, and the second I thought about what to do, I realized I had 4 options. I could go up, I could run back down, I could stay still, or I could jump down the side of the railing. I felt like I'd probably die regardless of what I chose, but I would most definitely die if I jumped. It was an 11 stories jump, and I'd without a doubt critically injure myself. I don't know what came over me, but I was in no state to think anything through. I started to go up, and the flashlight on my phone continued to illuminate the figure. I got very close to the figure when I was finally able to see the person in front of me. The man was much taller and had a crazy grin on his disheveled face. I knew this was the end for me. "I am Professor S. Brown," the man said in the creepiest way, making me want to die from disgust. He moved to his right, making space for me. "Sorry about the water. Some pipe broke," the man continued. I could see him a lot better now. He was a plump man wearing an old-looking oversized brown coat over a maroon sweater and blue denim jeans. His eyes were light blue, and he had brown hair. No, scratch that description. His eyes looked like he was high on drugs and crazed to the max. "Watch your step or you might hurt yourself," he said with a giggle. The man continued to giggle till I reached the 12th floor. That is, the floor that he was on. "This way," he said and started walking towards a room on the 12th floor. If this was any other day, and if I were in any other circumstances, I would have followed the man wherever he went. On that day, I quickly, but not as quickly as I'd like, opened the lock screen on my phone, which directly opened my class schedule. The schedule clearly said 13th floor. I looked back at him. He had stopped and was looking directly into my eyes. He wasn't giggling anymore. He wasn't even smiling. I decided that even if this man was supposed to be my teacher, I would rather just skip this class and lose my credit than be around him. I quickly ran towards the floor above, and I saw Professor S. Brown run towards me at full speed. The 13th floor did not have as much water as the 11th or 12th floor, and I could clearly hear 4 or 5 people running behind me. I ran like I had never run before, and yet it felt like I couldn't have been slower. I made it to the 13th floor and literally ran for my life. I used my flashlight to look at the door of every room, and finally came across one that said, "Fear, Psychology, Practical." I felt hot tears brimming up my eyes as I tried the doorknob. It didn't open. I kept trying the doorknob frantically. I heard the running steps starting to catch up, and simultaneously faint elevator music filled my ears. I was still trying the doorknob. Both the lift and the steps started to get louder and louder, as if it was open the whole time. The door opened and I practically fell inside the room. The door closed itself behind me as I dropped to the ground for the second time, and this time my phone felt much harder. I quickly got up in the dusty, dimly lit room and went back to lash the door shut behind me. The room wasn't very big, and it was empty. I picked up my phone, but it was dead. It had completely stopped working, and the flashlight feature had stopped working too. I felt the tears go down my face, but I quickly wiped them off. I couldn't hear anyone outside the door, but I knew they had to be out there. I looked around the room and saw a window. I ran towards it and looked outside. There was a broken water pipe that went down the outer walls right by the window, but there was also a tiny ladder just beside it. It went all the way down to the ground floor. For the first time that night, I felt like I was a fortunate person, but that thought was quickly replaced by the thought of the lack of practicality of the ladder. It was too tiny for me to use it. The doorknob started to rattle. Someone outside was trying to turn the knob ferociously. I looked around and saw nothing but layers of dust in a wooden room. I looked at the door, and even though it was tightly shut, it didn't feel like a safe barrier. And finally, I looked at the window. The tears came up again. My body was cold, and the hot tears felt like a sign of my defeat. I closed my eyes and did what I had done after entering the building. Despite the situation, I took a moment and took 3 deep breaths. The door was being pounded now, and it was loud. I went to the window and pulled it up. The glass slid up with ease. I put my phone in my jeans pocket and climbed out the window. This was the second time I felt fortunate because most of my pants don't have pockets. I don't know how I climbed down that freaking shaky tiny ass ladder, but I did. And I ran back to a world that didn't seem or feel dreamlike weird. As soon as I sat on the bus, which would take me back to my apartment, my phone started to work. It opened my class schedule straight away. My attendance for the day's class was marked as present, and the next fear psychology practical class had a completely different address. I got home, took a shower, and put some first aid on my wounds. It was late at night and I was just thinking of what to do next when a thought struck me. A thought that made my heart stop, my mouth go dry, send chills down my spine and make my body numb. I opened my phone again. The date for my next fear psychology practical class was in a couple of months, but the class address was the address of my apartment.